when you kind of get out of the forest and you start looking around and really seeing what's going on, you realize that no two schools are teaching the same thing. And we're all just kind of descendants from the same way of thought. So, Trevor, how are you? How are things up in Vermont?
Good. I am very, very sunburnt. Basically, the pond. We
Yeah.
did. We're kind of draining it and dredging it and doing some stuff to clean it up. And so Glenn and I were out there um, working for the past 2 days. My feet are totally cut up.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
super sunburned, and I smell like a swamp.
Are
But
you are you hand dredging the pond, like just taking up
So
tons of
we,
scum
we
and
have some
tossing it aside?
pumps, and we were kind of we were experimenting around with some different stuff because we want to. There's like you know a foot, more than a foot in some areas of just like silt, like highly fertile silt. Um, and we're gonna be basically dredging it, but we can only reach so far from the edge, even once we drain it down. So we were like, okay, well maybe we should, as we're draining it, try and see what we can do in the deepest parts that we won't be able to get to. Um, and we did some stuff. It wasn't super effective. It was basically mucking around in, a pond for an
Yeah.
entire day. We did expand the island a little bit.
Cool. That's
That's
cool.
cool.
I
Increase
mean,
bigger.
we were
But yeah,
talking.
that is basically what I've been doing for the past 2 days. I cleaned up the obstacle course a little bit, and I was working on my pull-ups
Nice.
because I'm really bad at those. And I actually I had a couple really good days, and then I was getting greedy as I do. My issue is I always hyperflex. I'm like, I want to get better splits.
Hmm.
And so I was like way past where I should have been, and I kind of pulled something in my
Oh
elbow.
no.
So I've been resting that. So basically, yesterday was the second day we were doing the pond, and I was like, my feet are all messed up. I'm like trying to like nurse my arm as I'm like in the muck. I look like Igor,
I'm an
flinging
old man
water
killer.
around and shoveling and sticks and stuff. And I was really sunburnt, so every time I moved, I was like, "Oh, that really hurts." But
Yeah.
that's what I've been up to.
Well, when you were talking about the pond, it was reminding me of last week's episode where we were talking about the camp and all the facilities and things that are up there. And I think the pond is one thing that's really special. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been meaning to kind of fix the pond. It's been sitting there for a long time, 50, 60 years. No one's really done anything with it. And it's just that scum that's been coming up, coming up, coming up. And I remember uh, the last few times we had the camp, we tried to go out there with the students and, do some swims and stuff. And, I just look at this look of horror on our students' faces when their foot plunges like 2 feet down into like
Yeah,
fish poop,
yeah,
basically, and in some ways, it's actually kind of like a test of willpower to get out
yeah.
there and get in the muck. And so I'm a little bit sad that we're dredging that pond and making it actually nice because uh, I actually,
Well, mom, for the kids, because Glenn's kids are here, mom wanted to um like make a nice area, and so she had some sand brought in. And it's like, I actually think it's not bad. It's not like, Caribbean clay sand or whatnot. Like, it's kind of like gray, gravelly Vermont sand. But there's a little area that she put that down so you can actually like
like granite.
walk out into the water and you're not like you know
Yeah.
put down into muck. So it's just, there's like a lot of reeds to either side of that, and so we need to clean that out, and that's going to be a big process. So
The one thing I always like to tell my students when they go up there and they're swimming around and their foot just sunk like 2 feet down into the muck is I like to tell them that story of when, I don't know if you were there, but Glenn and I were out catching frogs with our friends from Rhode Island. Um, and we got deep into the reeds, and we're kind of swimming around. We're looking for frogs and catching them, putting them in jars. And we come out, and I look over at Glenn and I say, "Hey, what is that black thing on your neck?" And he's like, "What?" And he reaches it and pulls it off, and it was this, big leech, And he's
Yeah.
like, "What's that thing on your arm?" And then we're just like going back and forth, and we're just covered in them, and freaking out and pulling them off. And this is the first time I had a leech on me, But
Yeah.
it was a really cool experience. So
I don't think I got a single leech on me the entire time we were working there. So.
yeah, well, hopefully when we dredge the pond, we won't get rid of all the leeches, because there's got to be a little bit of risk of leaching, But anyway, maybe we should move on to the topic of today, which is talking about martial arts and, how martial art disciplines really, I think, are conceived in a way that is a bit, I don't know if the right word is outdated or overly limiting, but it doesn't really capture the way I truly think you should look at martial arts. I think when I think of like the way that we think of evolution and how evolution actually works is similar to the way martial arts are. So evolution, things are always evolving slowly, little bit at a time. And when we look at the dinosaurs, we have like one T-Rex skeleton and one Brontosaurus skeleton, but there were like millions of iterations that happened in between those two, in between those animals and in their evolutionary chain. But it's just because, out of billions of animals, we can only find one that was properly preserved. So it looks like there's nothing in between those two stages. And I think the same thing is true with the evolution of martial arts. We tend to look at them from the present, looking back into the past. And when we do, we say like, okay, a martial art is a set number of techniques and theories put together in a certain way that has been passed down by master to master, or master to student, over many years. And while that's kind of true, it's really doesn't do justice to the reality, much like saying, a bird came from a velociraptor, without explaining, well, it came in many iterations, and there were a lot of, dinosaurs that went extinct that you don't know about, and it was a very slow, organic process. As I see the martial arts, it's basically, there is one school that is so well known for what it teaches that it grows beyond a single business or franchise to incorporate an entire movement of people that are all teaching the same sort of theory and techniques. And it's a lot more loose than people give it credit for. I mean, I think, when you're first starting in the martial arts, you think, okay, what my school teaches is really similar to what, the next Taekwondo school is teaching. And the truth could not be further from that reality. Even within a single certifying body like the Kukiwan, schools teach radically different things. In fact, some schools will be, teaching, they may categorize it a little bit like, this is more of our Hapkido curriculum, and this is more of our Taekwondo curriculum and whatnot. But some schools may be teaching sweeps and throws and submissions in the same school, in the same breath that they're teaching, front kick, roundhouse kick, spinning hook kick. And even the way that they teach those kicks might be different. They might have different theories. In Taekwondo, some people like to throw a spinning back kick from the ground. Some people like to chamber it and thrust backwards. Some people like to do a side kick where they pivot all the way through. Others like to kind of push their weight against it and do their side kick. Roundhouse kicks, there's a million different variants of the ways you can do a roundhouse kick if you're going for speed or power. And a lot of schools will be totally hell-bent on just one way as opposed to the other ways, because I think that this is the only way to do it. And so it just leads to, when you kind of get out of the forest and you start looking around and really seeing what's going on, you realize that no two schools are teaching the same thing. And we're all just kind of descendants from the same way of thought. Um, so,
Well, it's interesting. I kind of wanted to jump in there because I know for myself it is come up many times in talking with parents and students who come in where they say, "Oh, I did Taekwondo once," or "I did this once," and I didn't have a positive experience with it. And I know that we're always saying like, well, it really depends. The dojang, the instructor, every school is very, very different. It's not like all Taekwondo schools are the same, all karate schools are the same. Um, we have this tendency to kind of paint them as a monolith, but the teacher and the specifics of that school and that school's culture really determine your experience of that art. And that's why some people they had great English teachers and English was their favorite class, while other people's had terrible English teachers and they hated English
that's a
class.
really good analogy.
And,
Yeah.
and there's that you find that in every subject in school. I know for myself, I loved physics class, and I know a bunch of other because I had a great physics teacher.
Yeah.
So it's kind of reinforcing that it's not a monolith. It really depends on the atmosphere and the culture of the school, what
That,
they're choosing to work on. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so that reminds me of Mr. Balistreri and
I
how
was gonna
he
say,
taught English was this very romantic. Is an English teacher that I had first, and then when Trevor got to high school, because we went to the same high school, he ended up having actually the same English teacher who was like the best English teacher in the school, and
yeah,
everyone loved to have him. And he used to play like music during class. He was a really good guitarist and sing, and the way he picked all these books that like were really fun to read that would get kids up off out of their chairs, reading these books and being inspired by them. It was a lot like the Dead Poets Society.
mm-hmm.
And the way he taught English was from a point of inspiration and less from a point of like, being a grammarian. And I remember when I got to college, I had another English teacher who I really, really loved. And she was like this, uh, you know, hardcore like tactician where she was like, okay, in this sentence, in this particular instance, you can only use this word and this is how you use it. And I was like kind of looking for that my whole life because no one really ever broke things down into like such a deep and like specific way that I also found her really exciting. And these two teachers could not be more different from each other. And if you were to like look at them like we look at martial arts, you would say, well, they're two different English disciplines, and like but it's really just how you imagine things. Um, my whole concept with one way, Bruce Lee had a saying. He says, the highest art is no art. The highest form is no form. In Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee attempted in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the book he wrote, to lay out some fundamental principles that he found were reality in self-defense. And then he said, but your body may be different than my body. I have one longer leg than the other, so I fight with one side forward. That's how I play my game. I have certain things that I learned from Kung Fu that I'm very, very proficient at, and I've designed my game around those things. However, your Jeet Kune Do could be different than mine. And so he had a very similar goal to myself. And I think of all the mixed martial artists, he was really the first mixed martial artist. He was a mixed martial artist at a time when no one was really talking about it. And he came out of a culture that was preventative to the idea of mixing martial arts. It's one of the reasons why it happened only when it came to the West, because we're open to that kind of a thing. So he's a real inspiration to me. And I like to say something very similar because I find, the highest art, is kind of like difficult to wrap my mind around. So I say, all arts are one art. All ways are one way. And that's why my discipline is one way, because we are trying to look at the martial arts as a whole and see, well, what is the most important things for self-defense to teach first? And then allow our students to really appreciate all the beauty that's out there. I think one of the big problems we have with, you know, MMA and with the direction we are going with martial arts is that people only care about fighting, only care about what is practical for self-defense. And while I think that the bedrock of any discipline needs to be grounded in that, and that's the starting place, that's what makes things romantic, that everything that you're learning is kind of grounded in self-defense. The martial arts, one of the greatest things about it is that it has a place for everyone. And, you know, some people might not really be into the heavy contact sparring. They might be more into the introverted forms or the, you know, spirituality, the breathing exercises, the philosophy. I mean, martial arts brings together so many different disciplines. You know, people say, well, why does it take, you know, so long to become a martial arts master? You know, like in one way, 15 years typically. Why would, you know, that seems ridiculous to me. Well, you know, it's like, I want you to be a like kinesiology major and a history major, and like you have to like put all these different disciplines together, and that's why it takes such a long time. But I think one of the greatest things about the martial arts, and we need to get back on topic because I'm going way off here, is that it is a complete life discipline that you can do your whole life, you know, unlike other things. You know, we can kind of put that on other things. You know, like I've talked to people really good at, I was talking to a guy who's really good at violin a few years ago, and he's like, yeah, the way you talk about martial arts is just like the way I talk about violin. It's like everything. And, you know, I think you can do that with anything, but I think the martial arts automatically has that depth. It's like built into how rich and diverse the actual curriculum of the martial arts is, because you're just basically, nothing is as essential as survival, and nothing is as complicated.
Yeah.
But kind of going back a step, unless you have something to add on that, Trevor.
No.
Kind of going back a step, I want to talk about how we conceive martial arts disciplines. You know, I think one of the best examples of what I'm trying to hit on here is Shotokan karate. All right, Shotokan karate is one of the most well-known karate styles. In fact, it's more well-known than, I would say, Shorin-ryu karate or a lot of the traditional forms of karate. And our master of, I mean, this just shows you how interwoven the martial arts are. You know, our master, Sangsep Chun, learned under Gichin Funakoshi, okay? And it was, Gichin Funakoshi basically had one school. He started one school. He came from Okinawa to mainland Japan. He had trained under two masters that were in two different styles of karate. And then he started his school. And what he taught at his school became known as Shotokan karate. And now Shotokan karate is taught all over the world. And Shotokan karate is not, you know, all the same everywhere either. You know, different schools of Shotokan karate teach, you know, different theories and stuff like that. It tends to be a little bit with the traditional martial arts that they are a little bit more rigid in like what is a style, and that really comes from Asian way of thinking. You know, Asian way of thinking is that, you know, this is a do. Do means that it is a way, a path. It is established path in our society. And because of that, it is very narrowly defined. You know, only these techniques, only these ideas are Taekwondo. And I think that's really the wrong way to think about it. And when you know, Asian martial arts came to the West, we didn't think like that. Like we were like, okay, well, why do we do these techniques? And how do these techniques work against these other theories? Can we also include these other theories? And so, you know, when you look at a lot of westernized martial arts, it's more like what we're trying to do is one way, which is, well, what is the problem and how are we solving it? You know, if you look at, like, let's say, I did a little bit of high school wrestling back in the day, And, you know, my coach taught me very different techniques than my friend's coach over at his high school. And it's basically, these are the rules. You're trying to pin somebody on the shoulders, and you can do it like any way you want to, as long as you don't do these things, you know.
Mhm.
And there's certain techniques that emerge out of that. But if you look at self-defense, there are no rules, guys. There's no rules. You know, you want to stab your finger into their eye socket and tear it out. Yeah, you can do that. You can tear off their, you know, I don't know, it makes it a little PG, but, you know, tear off, you know what. And you can do anything you want. And because of that, there really is an unlimited amount of things that can be done and knowledge to be collected. And if your martial art is trying to solve the puzzle of self-defense, you cannot limit yourself. So it's like such a narrow scope as like, well, it's these set of techniques that this person taught. When I'm structuring the curriculum for our school, I'm trying to think, all right, what is the most essential things that they need to learn for self-defense? And what are the universal principles of the inner workings of the human body? How do you generate power? How do you get an additional leverage? All these kind of things. And I try to teach them to the students.
So I
And
guess the question
yeah,
would be, what is different between MMA that you see at a, you know, UFC fight, things like this, modern MMA in the United States, and what you want to do with one way? What's the difference there?
yeah. So I see them. I think one way has everything MMA has, but it has a lot more. Um, you know, one of the problems we have in the martial arts right now is there's two camps. There's the traditionalist camp that want to just basically pass down exactly what they were taught from their master before at exactly that way. And they're kind of falling behind because we're always learning. You know, think about how much we've advanced in science and technology. Well, we're advancing in the way of fighting with unarmed combat. This is not something that we really ever fought with. Like, you didn't see a society, even stretching back thousands of years, that ran around punching people and kicking people to fight in warfare.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is not something that really has been workshopped in forever, you know? And so it really started when, I'm really going all over the place. These are all topics we should explore in depth in their own episodes, but I feel like it's hard to talk about one thing without sort of teaching people about other things. But, you know, martial arts as we know it really only started like 100 years ago with judo, and probably a few hundred years before that with, you know, jiu-jitsu and some of these martial arts that were coming out of the samurai culture, where masters were no longer able to teach their, you know, sword fighting skills and whatever to the military, because the military is like, we're going to use guns now. And they're like, well, how can we repurpose those skills? Well, we're going to teach them to civilians as a way of personal embetterment. And we're going to teach them with leadership life skills and all that kind of stuff. And so, what was your point, Trevor? Was
Well, I was talking about what's the difference between MMA and one way, and because I think a lot of people are going to hear we're incorporating anything that is useful, anything that is good.
Yeah.
But there is something that's very different about MMA. And you were starting to go into the things that I think this is where you're going to go, the things that MMA leaves behind.
Yes.
And
Yeah, that is where I'm going. So basically, you know, we got these two camps. We have the traditional martial artists that are just trying to pass things on, and they're kind of falling behind because we're making great progress. We're kind of actually flatlining, but we made a lot of great progress in the time that I've been a martial artist. When I started in martial arts, the leading theories of the day are very different from the leading theories of today. We've learned a lot because we've been workshopping things. And, you know, there's one way, which is that you're just going to stick with what you know and just keep doing that. They're kind of losing. They're kind of, you know, losing this game. They're kind of shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. On the other side of it, all of these people are, they kind of, I don't want to get political, a little bit of reflection of our society right now, which is, you know, don't listen to your elders and see what they have to teach you. Just kind of do your own thing, go off in your own direction. And they're really missing a lot of the lessons of our forefathers. The leadership life skills, the respect, the discipline, the courtesy, the integrity, the perseverance, all the stuff that we learn from traditional martial artists. That really is the ultimate goal for training. You know, like how many times are you going to defend yourself? Like once or twice if you get unlucky? But you're going to learn those use those leadership life skills every single day of your life. Those are the most important things to take away. And those are the things that are missing from MMA right now. And those are the things that we're going to reintegrate into the more progressive curriculum to make it something completely unique that doesn't exist anywhere else, that is not like this, you know, sort of, you know, what I see is I see a lot of schools that are trying to do what we're doing. They're like all these, they're kind of half, 1 foot in one side and 1 foot in the other side. They got this sort of patchwork uniform and this sort of patchwork approach to teaching the martial arts, where it's partly compartmentalized and partly like integrated. And it's really just, it looks kind of gaudy. It is kind of gaudy, and it's confusing and not a cohesive instructional program, which is what we're attempting to do. What I've been attempting to do for 20 years, you know. When I say that we're starting one way, you know, I should make the note that everything my students have been learning up until this point is essentially one way. It's just the things that we've been, like I've made a lot of changes over the years to my Taekwondo to make it better. You know, the way I learned how to do certain kicks and punches may have been more for point sparring or, you know, for whatever, like speed and all that kind of stuff to work within a certain rule set. And I've basically made little alterations here and there to make it better for self-defense. And, you know, I think it makes our school just much better. And I don't want to be, you know, weighed down with the weight of all the other schools doing their things. They do whatever they want. You do your own. I'm not going to tell anyone else what to do. But I know what I'm teaching. Like I stand by what I'm teaching. And I want to put a stamp that says this is, you know, the kind of thought that my students, this is the kind of rigor that my students have. Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of circled around this idea. I mean, the thing that we wanted to talk about today was why, like, what is a martial art? And, you know, why is it important to be going in this direction, you know, with the school? And we got a lot of other things that we'll be, you know, talking about over the next few years, I'm sure. But do you have any questions, Trevor? Anything to add on to that before you let people
No,
know?
you know, the thought that I had was you were talking about, you know, really what our students have been learning this whole time has been one way. And it just made me think back to our conversations. I guess it was last week we were talking about Vermont and the summer sessions up here, and just seeing that slow transition from you coming up in Taekwondo, branching out towards college, starting your program and the fellowship, and how unique that was because it was incorporating those other aspects, the philosophy, and this is just another step in that process. It's got a big label on it, but I think it's not an entirely separate thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And just for those people who are grasping their armchairs right now and worried that um, this is a vastly different direction, it really isn't. Everything that my students know, like my students know all the Taekwondo stuff that a Taekwondo practitioner knows. They just know a lot more. And because of that, I want them to not be like unfairly perceived. Taekwondo has made a big push towards two things in the last 15, 20 years, unfortunately. And that has all come within my lifetime in the martial arts. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And this push is towards childcare, which we are the kings of, and I am very appreciative for what they have taught me in that. I mean, I think our school does really fantastic things with teaching kids how to be outstanding leaders in our society, and I want to keep that flag moving forward. But I also see it's also moved another direction too, which is towards sport. And some of the best athletes in the world are Taekwondo competitors. But that also means that the rules have gotten so complicated now that they don't really bear much resemblance to reality. And so that's another direction that it's good. Like, you have to have competition. This is a topic for a very different video. But you also need to have theory that is more addressing street self-defense. And so,
Well, and it also, just to jump before we get too far from the child's care, um, while that's a great strength, it also then can create a label where you have bad taekwondo schools that are just seen as daycare, and then it starts to get people to kind of write it off. And so there's always this perception of the martial art, and how that's interacting with what we're doing, and that can be a difficult line to walk.
yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think that, sport competition is really good. And I think, being good with kids is very good. But we have to remember that what will inspire the masses is that we are first and foremost a place to learn how to defend yourself. Everything else is we have all these other trees that are layered on top of this rock. And they're all really beautiful and awesome. And I want my students to explore them all. But there has to be this foundation underneath it all that is holding everything. Because if that goes out, people don't care about the other things. Like, you will lose the respect of the martial arts community as a whole.
Yeah.
This is very important. It is actually one of the reasons why I feel so hell-bent on starting One Way, which has been, been in my journals for over 20 years, and with concepts and ideas and things that I want to accomplish, is that if you do not have this foundation, you won't even be standing on solid ground to articulate, well, why are forms important? Well, why is childcare integral? Like, why is it important to teach your kids to be respectful and have discipline, all that kind of stuff? Because you have to first show them that you have this self-defense. And one of the reasons why I want to do this is because I want to be able to reach out to my, Taekwondo friends and say, look, all you need to do is change a few of your techniques to make them more self-defense friendly, and you got a great way of defending yourself. Anyway, we're getting way off topic.
No, I mean, I think it's all very relevant. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So, guys, we have a couple of great guests coming on soon. We got Master Justin Green and Master Joe Zapka coming up, and we're really excited to kind of pick their brains and see what they are doing in their schools. But until next time, keep training hard.